Hey folks, we're starting a little early today, and since it is November the 3rd, Election Day, we're talking about American civics as far as how a president is elected and a little bit of the process behind it and the changes over time. So when we come back tomorrow, we're going to talk about the Mongolians and then Genghis Khan. But for now, in the Google Classroom, I put a few links for you. The first two are to the National Archives. So that's kind of like a website set up by the federal government with official U.S. documents. The first is to the Constitution, and the second is to the amendments after the Bill of Rights. Right now I'm having the class read Article 2, Section 1. And so this is going to give us a brief overview over how presidents are selected, at least as far as the Constitution is defining it. And then we're going to move on from there. So. Hey kids, y'all ready? Okay, so who actually does the choosing of the presidency? Who picks the president according to the Constitution? Well, the House of Representatives chooses somebody to choose the president. It's just the electors, the electors. So whenever we're talking about people getting to the president, have y'all heard of the Electoral College? So the Electoral College, I think I showed you a video about this yesterday. That's each state based on its population. And they also get a few just for one being a state, one for each senator, get to pick who's going to be the president. the total number of electors is 538. If there's a tie down between there, who gets to then pick? Who's the tiebreaker? It said so in section 1. Somebody gets to choose 5 to break that tie.
The vice president?
The vice president. So it's in Article 2, Section 1, if there is a tie.
Would it be a Senate?
Yeah, so they get to choose 5 individuals. Yeah, Congress picks 5 individuals to break that tie. And so they have something in place. Now, electors are the people in the Electoral College. The reason we have the Electoral College is because of this statement right here. It's to make sure that the majority cannot harm the minority. That's why we don't have a popular vote for the presidency. We tally the popular vote so that we can see where the people generally stand across the nation. But it begs an old question. Is America made up by the people of America or by the states of America? And you'll see here that their intention was to make it kind of a mix. That's why it's called the United States of America. You have to remember, originally when they were putting the country together, they had to get states to agree to even join this experiment. And so the electors, however, as you saw, were chosen by Congress. So Congress chooses who these electors are. But let me show you. So we can get Electoral College map. Electoral College map. And so Congress chooses these individuals, if I remember correctly. But each place has their own population and all that good stuff. And so, oh man, what a lame map. Okay. All right. So each state gets picked. So essentially, that's why presidents go from state to state, or at least candidates, and they try to drum up support within that state. So let's look at Texas. They have 38 electors in the Electoral College. The Constitution doesn't say anything about Electoral College, but a lot of what we have in American federal government comes from tradition. Article 3 of the Constitution doesn't say how many Supreme Court justices we need to have, but tradition, it's been 9 for a very long time. And then part of it is so that it can have an odd number as a tiebreaker. But going back to this, the Electoral College built up from tradition over time. And so the electors are chosen. And like, let's say Texas, whatever the population of Texas votes, 51 or more percent for, all 38 electors are supposed to then go with that majority and vote for that person to be president. Occasionally, though it doesn't happen very often, you have something called a faithless elector. And so let's say 51% says a certain candidate. 37 might vote for that candidate, but one person's like, I can't do that. So they vote for the other. There have been some proposals in the law throughout states to try to avoid this. I'm not really sure how far it's gone. But usually how it works out is the electors go with wherever the majority of citizens in that state want to go. So as you've seen, like yesterday, some of the states have very high populations, so they get to make a lot of decisions for the rest of the country. But if it was based only on a popular vote, pretty much like Los Angeles, Houston, Dallas, New York area, and Miami would pretty much choose the president every time. The other states for the United States, though they have a smaller population, their voice would essentially vanish. So that's the argument for the Electoral College. Of course, the argument against the Electoral College is pretty obvious. You let the most people vote, and that just seems to be at face value more fair. So that's the system we have. Of course, it could change. I mean, who knows? Maybe in your lifetime. It would take a constitutional amendment to do so. And something we're going to see now. So, yeah, the first electors, like we said, or the first people who voted were white guys who were property owners. The founders at first wanted to have only property owners vote because they thought that people who didn't own property might not want what's best for the country. The idea was that the people who would look for the best for everyone in general were people who had a stake in the country. And they saw that as people who were property owners at the time, because most people were agriculturalists, right? So there wasn't a lot of industry. There weren't a lot of people who were working like pay jobs. And so land was the way to do it. Here's what I want you to do now. So we got 4 amendments that essentially change the way that we vote for the president. And the first is the 15th. Can y'all look at the 15th Amendment for me real quick in your little pocket constitution? And who does the 15th Amendment give the right to vote to?
Citizens.
Citizens. What kind of citizens?
Of the United States.
The United States. The same thing else?
Of race, color, or.
Yeah. So
Previous condition of servitude.
or servitude. So what this says, we have the 14th, 15th, and 16th Amendments. We often call these the Civil War amendments because after the Civil War, a lot of people died in order to change the shape of the country. So a lot of people died, some for slavery, but the ones who died for the right to free slaves. And the 15th Amendment allows them to vote, but it doesn't allow everyone to vote. So it allowed all male citizens to vote. So the Constitution is a changeable thing. It's the supreme law of the land. All laws within the United States, whether through our states or federal government, must tie back to the Constitution. Now, this made women a little upset because the anti-slavery movement and the pro-suffrage movement, or right for women to vote movement, was tied hand in hand. But it's going to separate after this. Could y'all look up the 19th Amendment for me?
Yeah, it gives, the right to, women.
Yeah, so this is for women.
Yeah.
And so this was through the traditional, there's 2 ways to amend the Constitution to change it. You have the regular way, where you have a supermajority of Congress propose an amendment, and then 3/4 of the states in the United States have to vote on it, have to ratify yes, 3/4. The other way, called the Convention of States, has never been done before. That's where states get together, and then the states get to decide what a constitutional amendment is. You can't really get states to agree on anything, so that hasn't happened yet. It might happen one day. So yeah, and so what you have here is women have been fighting for the right to vote, and they managed to convince the male population to vote for that. And so here you have the United States willingly change the right to vote and expand it time and again. And the property owner one didn't change through the Constitution, because who gets to vote regularly is actually decided by the states. States have the power to decide who gets to vote. A state can decide whether felons can or cannot vote, right? However, through the constitutional process can force all the states to abide. So in some states, women could have the right to vote. This way, they all could. Here, this would allow even people of other races, as long as they're citizens, to vote. Now, what about the 24th Amendment? What does that do?
You can vote even if you, I don't know, even if you haven't paid your taxes.
Even if you hadn't paid your taxes?
It's like something like that. It has full tax in it.
So this is that all it says is taxes?
To vote in any election.
That's saying so the president can vote, the vice president can vote, the congress members can vote, everybody can vote.
Everybody can vote? Well, this has to do with, it mostly has to do with, like everyone can vote for what though? In what?
Primary.
Primaries, yeah. So everyone can vote in primaries. So here, let me tell you why that's important. So primaries are when political parties choose who their candidates are. So this time around, there were primaries for the Republican and the Democrat Party. Trump is the incumbent, and usually a political party keeps the guy who's in office as their candidate. So his was easy for him. Biden had to go through a bit of a race, though, where he had to go against other Democrat opponents who also wanted to be president. So that's why they had the Democrat primary debates. And then eventually, his party was chosen state by state. They chose, the majority of states chose him. And so that's where ordinary people are able to participate in who the Democrat candidate was. And then he selected his vice president, Kamala Harris. And so, I mean, Trump went through the same thing 4 years ago when he had a whole bunch of Republicans he was facing off against. And then he chose his vice presidential candidate, Mike Pence. So this is, you see, all of these things, though, they have a common theme. They're making the country more democratic in a sense, because though they're not getting rid of the offices of the republic, they're allowing more people to participate in it. And so that's been a big theme throughout American history. You see an expansion of who can participate in how the machine works. Now, what about the 26th?
18-year-olds.
Yeah.
18-year-olds get the right to vote. Yeah, some states allowed it, some states didn't. Now, it's an arbitrary number. We all know that some 18-year-olds are smart, some aren't smart, some 40-year-olds aren't that smart, and some 12-year-olds are smarter than the 18-year-olds. But some of the fairness that's applied here is the age was already set for things such as military service and things like that. So it's a pretty easy argument to say if somebody can lay their life down for a country, they can at least punch a name on a ticket to see who might be in charge of it. All right. So there have been proposals in some places to perhaps lower the age. I know there was talks in California and lowering it down to 16. I think they would have the right to do that because the Constitution says that it's up to the states. These amendments simply make mandatories. So for better or worse, yeah, see, like you could say, you could make the argument if everyone's expected to be in high school at least, mandatory school until 18, maybe they should at least finish their education. So I could see an argument for that. Of course, you could also say if they're legally able to drive and put your life in danger, they could have say so. So you could say an argument in that.
Nearly 16, we're pretty stupid.
But if you were going to do something though, like I said, some people are smarter than others. You got to be careful though, because what if you started having intelligence tests to see who could vote? That would be a little dangerous because that could disenfranchise people. They used to do that back in the days of Jim Crow with poll taxes and literacy tests. And so I don't think we want to go back to those days. So you could always wind up disenfranchising people. But yeah, like a lot of states, they already do. I think all states, or at least most states, do not allow people who committed federal crimes to vote, right? Because they're like, hey, if you tried to murder someone, maybe you don't need to vote. So, you know.
I actually knew someone that went to jail and he got to vote after 6 years after getting out of jail.
Yeah, see, some of them have like a period, right?
He got so excited.
Yeah, some of them have period. There's some that are lifetime. Like it depends on what the crime is, right? It depends. So some states, of course, they put all kinds of limits on people who've committed federal crimes, such as or they're felons, can't own a firearm or stuff like that. So if you rob a bank, a lot of states are like, hey, you can't own a gun anymore. So, because no one rob a bank anymore. Let me show you something real quick.
What's on our bank tonight?
Then why would you
can't
give
own
them
a
a
knife
gun?
anymore.
I mean, if you're dangerous with a
If
knife,
you take
you
away the
can't
gun,
cut
they
a
have
shit
knives.
firearm.
There aren't any laws against swords.
There are too.
Like what?
Yeah, they fall under knife laws.
No.
Yeah, it's on the Texas. I pull it up.
What's
for
the,
you.
what's the length of, what's the definition of a knife?
Yes. Yes.
Look, I could probably pull it up for you later. Because there's even things like as far as like what kind of boots you can use, like kick somebody with. If you wear shod boots, that's considered a deadly weapon, like metal tipped boots and stuff like that.
Steel toe
So-
Skechers.
Saps have only just become legal again in Texas. You
What?
know, like a sap's like a little leather sock with like a lead weight in it. Old timey cops used to use it to knock people in the back of the head to make them like stop
That's just
fighting
a
and
mace.
stuff. Yeah, it's like old school mace. It's like an old school taser. Instead of tasing you, they just hit you in the back of the head with something heavy. And you might make it. All right. So note to self: don't go back in time and cause problems with the police because you might have a headache. All right, so this is like a graphic from made by the federal government. It's a little fuzzy. I did the best I could. So you see, like start to finish, what it takes to become president. And like as you just read, you have to be a natural-born citizen. And so that's somebody who is born as an American citizen. That doesn't mean you have to be born in the United States. There's a lot of military bases overseas where soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines can have their families with them. And families have babies. And so if you're born, one of your parents is an American citizen, you're automatically born as an American citizen anywhere in the world. Minimum 35 years of age. It's an arbitrary number, but they figure it's at least enough time for you to have some life experience. Resident, 14 years in the U.S. So you could spend some time living overseas, but you still need to have enough time living in America to know how Americans are. So, then we have the primaries and caucuses. This is where people decide who they want to run against each other for their party's candidacy. Then those people campaign, say, I'll be the best Republican or the best Democrat. And then there's two processes for which parties can pick. Primary, which is like a regular vote, and a caucus, in which you essentially have people just kind of like in a room, and they just kind of have like a general discussion, and people like organically pick one person or another. They're a little more chaotic, and the rules are different from caucus to caucus. Some states do it this way, some states do it this way. But primary is the easiest one to figure out because people just put a name on a ticket, put it in a box, and then you count. Then you have national convention. This is where the person who wins their party's ticket gets to be the candidate for that party. And then they get to select their vice presidential pick. Moving on from there, then they start campaigning, and then they debate the opposite party. Of course, the campaigning can continue all the way to election day. Now, people vote before election day, of course. Every state has early voting, whether it's through mail or electronically, which is usually what I do because I don't want to be in a long line. I just take my wife and my kids, and we all go vote. I usually let my kids push the buttons for me. I mean, I tell them which buttons to push. I'm just like, hey, just pick anything there, but and then it's done. But then you have election day, which has it's the traditional way. And this is when you have most people usually turn out for a place. It starts very early in the morning. They usually don't shut down till the evening because they know a lot of people don't want to come until after work.
I think it should be a holiday where everybody's off, that way they can go vote.
It makes a lot of sense. Well, you know why they picked Tuesday? They picked Tuesday because there used to be blue laws in the colonies where people weren't allowed to travel on the Sabbath, on Sunday, because it's very traditional. And so they chose Tuesday because it was guessed that it took about a full day of travel in a buggy to go from your farm and some of the people who lived on the outskirts of town to vote. And so, You have church day, then you have travel day, then you get to vote on Tuesday, and then you get to go back home, like, hopefully by the end of Wednesday. So it's just like, they had to have travel time. So and we've kept it ever since. I mean, why do we have daylight savings time? We have daylight savings time because in World War I, they were running low on kerosene for the war. So they made daylight savings time to try to cut down on kerosene use. But nobody uses kerosene anymore. But we still have daylight savings time. So some states have been getting rid of it. I know Louisiana just got rid of it.
Wait,
I
they have no more daylight savings.
We do. Yeah, they don't. Like Arizona, Hawaii, Louisiana, and I think another
So
state.
we're on a
was
different
gonna-
schedule than what they are.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah. So right now in Louisiana, it's
It
9:40.
makes the whole entire, they have the map of what time it is. That makes the time zones messed up.
Well, I think
That
we
makes
should
no
all do it. Because look, I don't care if the sun's up when I go to work, but I would like the sun to be up when I get home because I got stuff to do. I get home like in December, every time I get home, it's dark. I'm like, why am I here? Let's just go to bed. So, all right. So off that topic, we have 538 electoral college votes. The number to look for is 270. That's the majority to win. Hopefully, whichever side does win will have a big enough majority to where it doesn't get too ugly. Because if it's a close race, it tends to go to the courts and people are undecided who the president actually is. But when they finally clear it all up, in January, we have Inauguration Day, where the president takes the oath of office and they give a fancy little speech talking about
And then one of them
things they're
gets
gonna
shot during the
do.
inauguration.
Oh, no, don't say that.
It has happened before. They get shot during the inauguration speech. I forgot who it was well, if it was the inauguration or some other speech that they took. That they got shot.
Teddy Roosevelt was shot during a campaign speech, but not an inauguration speech. And he actually gave up. He actually went up and still gave the speech after he was shot.
Yeah, because he got saved by his Bible.
Yeah. But he was still hurt though. He's still hurt. So, all right. Yeah. So here's what I want you to do. So, note to self, where you are. All right.
Puts on a piece of armor.
But here's what I want you to do. So the last thing we're gonna do, and I'll let you have to study the whole time, is I want you to get out a piece of paper and you can just jot down. They can be small phrases. I don't care. Like if you were running for president, what would be your three main platform items? 3 or 4 major things you would say I would change, or I would strengthen, or I would do away with if I was president.
I have no clue.
But well, remember, you're not king. You're not, so presidents have limitations. So be realistic.
Mass execution.
Okay, see, once again, you're not king. So, hey, folks, that's going to cut it for today. Talk to you tomorrow about
Change the law
the Mongolians. See ya.
for automatic weapons.
Girl.